I'm Zelee Hill from University College London, and today I'm presenting on behalf of a large group of collaborators who looked at thermal care practices in 4 African sites. So this was a qualitative study, and we collected data in Ethiopia, Tanzania, and in both the north and the south of Nigeria. And just to say that the site in the north of Nigeria was Borno State, where Boko Haram have a very high activity rate, and the research team there just did an amazing job to actually get data out of that site. So we used narrative interviews, focus groups, and we also did some observations of newborn care practices, and we interviewed a wide range of respondents, including mothers, grandmothers, husbands, and both facility birth attendants as well as traditional birth attendants. So interestingly, we found that across the sites there was a very common understanding amongst all respondent groups of the importance of warmth. But we also found that that was not directly related to some of the newborn care practices that we know are important ourselves. So respondents didn't mention drying and wrapping, they didn't mention delayed bathing, and they didn't mention skin-to-skin care at all. So their idea of thermal care was about putting hats on the babies and bathing the babies in warm rather than cold water. So it was quite interesting that there was a disconnect there. We also found a lack of knowledge and opportunity for skin-to-skin care, both in home and facility deliveries, with babies rarely left with the mother immediately after delivery. Wrapping and drying was variable across the site. So in southern Nigeria, for example, it was the norm, but in northern Nigeria it was less common. We also found that the practices of wrapping and drying are not always linked, and there's an assumption, particularly amongst people who are interested in indicators, that if you measure wrapping, you will also understand rates of drying as well. But we found, for example, in Ethiopia that babies were commonly wrapped, but they were not dried. In terms of bathing, in Nigeria, early bathing was nearly universal, both in facility and for home deliveries. And the main reason was a concern about body odour later in life. So if you didn't bath your baby, the smell of the birth fluids would enter inside the body and would stay there forever. And you, as a mother or a birth attendant, would be the cause of social stigma of being a very smelly person for the rest of time. In other sites, we found that making the baby clean, comfortable, and presentable to visitors was also an important reason for early bathing, with particular focus in Tanzania and Ethiopia around the vernix. So the vernix was seen as a result of poor maternal behaviours, such as eating bad foods and also having sex late in pregnancy. So an obvious vernix meant that you as a mother had done something wrong and you needed to remove that so others in the community wouldn't judge you. But interestingly, we found that there had been a recent change in Tanzania and Ethiopia, with many more babies having delayed bathing. In Tanzania, this was particularly linked to facility deliveries, and in Ethiopia to advice from health extension workers on the importance of delayed bathing. But we did find that this new practice was not always welcome, with women describing that they asked the health or the birth attendant to bathe the baby and the health attendant refused. So although these are promising, some of the mothers' reactions show that there's not enough dialogue going on about the importance of this practice. So where bathing was delayed, it was because of health workers' advice or their action, because there was a fear of cold, particularly if the baby was born at night, and because there was no obvious vernix. So if you didn't have a vernix, you could delay bathing for a longer time. So what does this mean? We found suboptimal practices in all sites, and given that mothers, birth attendants and health workers were not talking about thermal care in the same way that we were, we feel that more promotion is required. On a positive note, the adoption of thermal care practices is likely to be facilitated by the common understanding for the need to warmth. And it's very encouraging that bathing behaviours are changing in some sites, but discouraging that mothers don't really like this new practice. I think, just like Tanya was mentioning about change taking time, the bathing practices in Nigeria were very, very deeply rooted. And I think it would be naive to go in and think that by just doing some health promotion that will be changed quickly and easily. So I think that intervention developers need to be realistic about what it will take to change some of these more deep-rooted practices.